which the U.S. was strongly opposing. It's Nasser. The U.S. was supporting Saudi Arabia, of course, where all the oil is. There was concern that Nasserite secular nationalism might try to gain control of the oil resources and use them for regional development, not for enriching the dictators and the West and the petroleum companies. And Israel destroyed it. It destroyed secular Arab nationalism. And that was a tremendous gift. That's when U.S.-Israeli relations really took off in their current form. Increased later, 1970, when during Black September, when the Jordanian army was slaughtering Palestinians. It looked for a while as if Syria might intervene to protect the Palestinians. The U.S. didn't want that, regarded as a threat to the oil monarchies. But the U.S. was all tied up in Cambodia at that point. They couldn't do a thing. Israel mobilized and compelled Syria to withdraw, and the massacre continued. U.S. aid to Israel, I think, almost quadrupled after that. And so it continues.
Your point was driven home to me when I was over there before the first Intifada on a National Lawyers Guild delegation with Abdin Jabara. We were investigating the Israelis snatching secular Arab leaders. These were not particularly political people, artists and writers, doctors, snatching them in the middle of the night from their homes and setting them out into the desert because these were like secular figures in the community, and they didn't want any kind of leadership.
It was way back. In fact, Israel supported the Hamas in the early days. Israel used to bus students from the Islamic universities to Birzeit, a secular university, to break up student strikes and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Noam, you mentioned that when we asked about possibilities for change, that the United States really had to join the rest of the world with regard to Israel and Palestine and come down directly for a solution. And when you read now every day, it seems to me that more and more Palestinian land is just being gobbled up, both in East Jerusalem as well as in the West Bank. And, of course, we have the prison of Gaza. It seems to me getting less likely that the United States is going to do that, although world opinion is shifted even more in favor of the United States doing something. So what do you make of the current attempt to do negotiations today, of all the stuff about stopping settlements and everything you read in the normal paper every day?
Well, what you read in papers is, I'm sorry to say it, but it's just farcical. I mean, if there were serious negotiations going on, they would be run by some neutral party, and one side would be the world, and the other side would be the U.S. and Israel. I mean, that's what the conflict is. As far as what's supposed to be a conflict between the U.S. and Israel is a joke. It's about expansion of settlements. First of all, Obama's position is just repeating the wording of the famous roadmap, which is supposed to be the agreed position on steps should be taken. And the first stage of the roadmap says no expansion of settlements, even natural growth. Bush repeated that. That's, in fact, more or less his administration's plan. And Obama's repeating it. But is he going to do anything about it? Well, we know. Bush, number one, he at least imposed some very mild sanctions when Israel was expanding settlements in ways that he and Baker didn't like, cut back on loan guarantees. Obama was asked about that. So are you going to do anything about it? And his spokesperson at the press conference said, no, we're not going to impose any penalties like Bush number one did. Our position is completely symbolic. Well, that's telling Benjamin Netanyahu, do whatever you like. We'll continue funding them and give you the diplomatic support and the military support and so on. So do what you like. In other words, we're saying stop, but with a wink. Wink says go ahead. That's traditional. And now it's even more extreme. Furthermore, the whole issue of settlement expansion is a minor footnote. I mean, Israel already controls about 42% of the West Bank. And in fact, in the area that Israel totally controls, Area C, living conditions are alleged to be worse than Gaza by the international agencies that have been looking. So, yeah, maybe they'll expand it a little more, but they've already got everything they want. They can take more. Obama, in fact, just offer them a bit more in the Jordan Valley, which they'll, of course, gladly pick up. We're already keeping Palestinians out of them. The issue is the settlements, not expansion. They're all illegal. That's understood. Israel recognized it back in late 1967. Their leading legal authority, Theodore Meron, very respected international jurist, advised them that any settlement in the occupied territories is in violation of the Geneva Conventions, the core of international humanitarian law, instituted incidentally to criminalize Nazi actions. The Attorney General in Israel, Shimshon Shapira, he agreed. He said, yes, it's illegal. Moshe Dayan, who was in charge of the occupied territories, defense minister, he agreed too. He said, sure, it's in violation of law, but the countries violate law, so we'll go ahead, which means as long as the master in Washington condemns it with a wink, who cares? That's been underscored by Security Council resolutions, by the International Court of Justice. In fact, the U.S. Justice on the court filed a separate declaration that he basically agreed. He said that the Geneva Conventions applied to the occupied territories, meaning all settlement is illegal. In fact, not only is it illegal, but it violates any, it's designed carefully. They think it's designed carefully to ensure that there cannot be any viable Palestinian self-determination. And that's the Sharon plan. Sharon called it, he said, relief in Bantustans. And in fact, that's an exaggeration because South Africa needed the black population.
Yeah.
So they kind of... And furthermore, the U.S. and Israel, and this is crucial, for about 15 years now, have been working hard to separate Gaza from the West Bank. That is in direct violation of the wording of the Oslo agreements. And that's quite important. And by now that's virtually achieved. Well, all of this makes Palestinian self-determination almost meaningless as long as the U.S. persists in this policy.
In your book, you refer to the Palestinian Authority, or maybe Abbas, with the use of the word quisling. Can you just explain to our listeners what that is and why you think that of the PA? Oh, it might have been Pappé. Okay.
It is, actually.
You're right. I apologize.
Yeah, but I mean, there's something to it. In fact, just take the way they're viewed by the United States, which is what's important. Obama's point man on the Middle East is John Kerry, head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He gave an important speech on this, the main speech from the administration on Israel-Palestine. It was at the Brookings Institute. He, I think about a year ago, he said that Israel, of course, had described the United States as an honest broker, trying hard and so on and so forth. But putting aside the sort of patriotic imagery, he said something important. He said, for the first time, Israel has a legitimate negotiating partner, the Palestinian Authority. And then he gave the reason. The reason is that there's an army in the West Bank run by a U.S. general, Keith Dayton. He's now been replaced. The Dayton army, it's supported by the Jordanian dictatorship and by Israel. They all take part in training it and so on. And the army, he said, has proven itself very effective. And he gives one example. During the Israeli invasion of Gaza, the army was so effective that it put down any demonstrations in the West Bank, any sign of opposition to the attack. And General Dayton himself later said that we were so effective that Israel was able to take forces out of the West Bank and send them to attack Gaza. Well, what's the right word for that?
Quisling. Noam Chomsky, thank you very much for being on Law and Disorder. We urge our listeners to go out and get the new Haymarket book, Gaza in Crisis, that Noam wrote along with the great Israeli historian Ilan Pappé. It's a very fine book, and people should have this on their bookshelves, and they should read it and study it. So thanks, Noam. We certainly appreciate your being on the show.
Glad to be.
Thank you, Noam. If you want to hear Law and Disorder again, or hear a segment you've missed, go to lawanddisorder.org on the web. Now you should also go to Law and Disorder Radio on Facebook. Become a friend and send Law and Disorder to your friends through Facebook.